And at a certain point, I started doing public speaking. I definitely didn't go to school for that. No one teaches you that. And then I became an entrepreneur. And definitely no one taught me that. Maybe there's schools now. There wasn't schools 5 years ago for entrepreneurship, right?
This is the EFR Podcast, episode 34. This is your man, Sammy BE, Businessman Bassey, along with co-host James Lyman. And on the boards, like always, we have Jon Don Sterling. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very special episode. We have a dynamic person on the show who's actually going to speak about entrepreneurship, self-motivation, self-preservation, and as it relates to entrepreneurship, people striving and driving to become entrepreneurs or better business first people. He has a very long resume as I would say a peer-to-peer mentor, consultant. He's written many publications as well as his own different publications and different articles that you can find online. He's really prominently known, at least for me, when I've known him, it's really through his Inc.com. Everybody knows about Inc. magazine, Inc.com, the media outlet. And, the person that I have now is, he's been on TED Talks. When you go into TED Talks, that's how you made it. The TED lectures where you're lecturing and speaking about different come-ups. There's different TED Talks, but he's been doing that, and just along with other resources that he's been able to put together. And the person I'm talking about is Mr. Damon Brown. Can I get a one-time show clap for Mr. Brown, Damon Brown, Inc. magazine.
Wow. Thank you. I don't even know what it's. Wait, I got to stop you. It's too much. It's too much.
Thank you, man. Thank you for coming on, man.
I was to say I have 2 young kids who could care less about the amazing work I'm trying to do. So it's humbling to kind of be, like I said earlier, to be gassed up like this. I appreciate it. That's very
understood.
Kind.
Thank you for coming on, man.
Absolutely.
Looking at your background, I was speaking to, I've always speak to my team and okay, who's the next person that we want to have on, because we are like an economic, financial, or business podcast. And I would say just like a medium. I wouldn't even just say podcast. It's just like a medium. And when I read a couple of your articles, I thought it was going to be hard to get at you because a lot of people, when you're trying to get to them, it's hard to correspond. And you actually pretty prevalent, kind of reaching back, and I really do appreciate that. Even though I know you travel a lot, and I really wanted to kind of get perspective on, we're a podcast that focuses on millennials and Generation Z because we are the generation now.
Yes.
Everybody, John, myself, we're millennials, and then James comes from the older school, the baby boomers, and he kind of brings some of the insight, to kind of show us different perspectives. And having you on, we kind of just, it's a blessing and also an insight because we want to know, what you, maybe you can kind of describe what you do and how it all comes together as it relates to media, entrepreneurship, and consulting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm, even when I was younger, I consider myself to be the bridge generation. So I'm a young Gen X, early Gen Y. So I was, I'm a 70s baby. I was born in the mid 70s. And so, I started probably when I was like my youngest son's age. He's 3. And when I was 3, I started writing, and I was also into technology. So the stuff I do now, I knew that for a long time. So if you think about the late 70s, when I was, again, my son's age, then I learned to type on a typewriter. And I remember using whiteout. Half of y'all probably don't know what that is, but whiteout is when you... Right,
we still use whiteout.
That's wonderful.
I borrowed some from James. I borrowed some from James the other day.
Right, because you type and stuff, your facts and stuff. I that's what I grew up on. Back when they had Home Ec, and stuff like that, and I was the only dude in there. That whole thing, I was part of that. But then when I went to visit my uncle, who was really into tech, or I went to visit my auntie, who was a close family friend. And I remember getting onto Prodigy for the first time and CompuServe and playing the first Nintendo system, like the NES, like 1985, like that level. Yeah, back when it cost $300-400, that kind of thing. So I got exposed to that really early, but I saw the transition. And so my whole point is that, I really appreciate the age that I am, because I'm lucky enough to have like what they call, the analog, and then see it transition into digital. So hopefully I can be some type of bridge, and that's one of the things I try to do with my work. So, like you mentioned, like I have a regular column with Inc. magazine. I have a lot of editorial freedom, which is great. And so before we got on the line, you mentioned that I covered Jay-Z a few times. I actually covered 2 Chainz. His album came out a couple months ago. So he was talking about the same thing that the master marketer Seth Godin talks about. And it's like seeing that unity between, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and what Brene Brown and Oprah Winfrey and Simon Sinek and a lot of leaders in the business community, like you said, that are connected to TED. And some of them that I met, some of them that I saw speak at TED, they're saying the same thing, that you might see on a Beyonce t-shirt. And so ideally, like bridging that gap. When I was early in my career, I started as a journalist. I have 2 degrees in journalism, master's in magazine publishing. And there's a lot of details to the story, but the short version is that I got my grad degree and finished it as the recession happened, when the dot-com bubble was back in 2000. And so I had job opportunities, and they got retracted as I was graduating. And so suddenly I was on my... This is
you got your grad degree?
Yeah, I got a master's in magazine publishing in fall of 2000 back in from Northwestern. So I was back in Chicago. Yeah.
Got you. All right.
Yeah. And so just to give some quick context with it, that's what got me on my freelance journey. And I've been independent for, almost 20 years now. And it started with me writing for a couple small publications. Then I started writing regularly for Playboy, the website, and the magazine. That ended up shuffling into me writing books. So I realized there wasn't enough space for me to cover what I wanted to cover as a journalist. And my main focus at the time was technology, music, particularly hip hop, and sexuality, or how people connect. And so I was doing a lot of work for Playboy, as you can imagine, but also for the New York Post and other folks. And that elevated, like I said, to books. Books got me on the road, and I realized I liked public speaking more than I liked writing, which is a crisis when you have 2 degrees in journalism. And then, so that got me on the road. That got me on the head. And the real pivotal moment was when I started to do a startup around the exact same time I was becoming a stay-at-home dad with our first child. My wife has a traditional job, so I work from home. So I was like, oh yeah, definitely, I want to be a stay-at-home dad, spend as much time with my kid as possible. The partnerships that I had to help me with my startup disappeared the exact same week that my wife went back to work. So I was doing this startup. I was about to do my first TED Talk. Already hyped up this startup that I was going to do called So, which actually captured quotes using a cool little app back in 2013. And suddenly I was on my own doing this startup. And I'm a stay-at-home dad, never done it before, and I got a 4-month-old that's crying. And so I managed to juggle getting the startup off the ground and being present as a father. I had enough success with that, right? Getting a TED Talk. That was a TED Talk that you see online. That was in early 2014 about being present and connecting with other people. And that got the attention of 2 other people who were doing a startup. And it was a startup that connected people for hugs. And it was called Cuddler. And so my background, again, is technology and sexuality, or how people connect. And so I'm becoming the 3rd co-founder. I became the CMO, so the Chief Marketing Officer, also the COO, so the Chief Operating Officer, and I led the media campaign. And we ended up launching in September of 2014, shortly after my son's first birthday. And within a week, we became the #1 app in several countries, including America and Canada. We had 100,000 completed cuddles. So we connected 100,000 people within that first week. Got on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, within those few months. And at our peak, we had 250,000 users. And then we ended up selling the app just shy of a year of us starting it. So made a profit on that. My son had just turned 2. And to bring it all home, I realized that I was in San Diego at the time, so I wasn't living in Silicon Valley. African American job. If you do the math, I was about to turn 40. Had a home, right big fence. Literally ran the startup with my baby on one arm. And handling the business in the other. So about as non-traditional as you can get. And from the time I did spend in that Silicon Valley years prior, I was told that you had to sacrifice everything to make your mark as an entrepreneur. And then somehow I was fully present as a father, and I was able to have the success. And so that became the Inc. column. And so the Inc. column, which you can go to inkdamonbrown.com. I do it ideally every day, but it's at least once a week. So the frequency depends. But I've been doing it for 4 years, just had my 4-year anniversary. I got like 5 columns up there. So you can dig as deep as you want. And I'm really talking about the ways that you can maximize the systems that you have in place, whether it's technology, time management, productivity, rest. I'm a big advocate of naps. So whatever you need to do to make your dream come true without sacrificing the life that you currently have. And I'm really fortunate that I have a wonderful family. I have 2 sons now. They're growing up great. And I've been fully present for them the whole time, even though I've had the startup success, even though I'm doing TED Talks, all these different things. And so now I'm trying to pass that on to other people. And the Inc. column turned into my best-selling book, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. And it's basically taking some of the insight from the Inc. column and also some original stuff. It became a bestseller, so it became a series. So now I have 2 major books available. It's the Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur Trilogy. And you can go to damonbrown.net and hear about that. And that's the whole best-selling series into one book. It's a really good deal. There's also an audiobook for it. So if you want to do the audiobook, which is a big deal, I did it myself. So if you like my voice, get it. If you don't like my voice, please get the book. Sure. And then I have a book that just came out in February, which is a power level up power value. And we can talk more about that, but it's basically like the next level after personal coaching from the public speaking I've been doing and from the consulting I've been doing too. So trying to get like a nutshell around it, but that's why I consider myself to be a coach where you don't have to kill yourself to make your stuff a reality. And we have enough tools right now and enough wisdom, to make things happen without, like I said, without killing yourself. I don't want to help people on that journey,
Right. So, I guess utilizing your speaking, I guess you're trying to try to better people's way of living, I guess, in their entrepreneurial sense. Is that what you like a motivational speaker to kind of get people doing and being creative to become successful?
It's whatever that definition is for the individual person. So, like I mentioned, I do one-on-one coaching, and some people that I coach, they just want to get an idea out. Like they might want to write a book, or they might want to do this creative project. For other people, they already started on their journey, but then they end up having this life shift, and they're not sure how to translate that. On my own, without kids, crazy. Writing books. I've done 24 books. So I was doing a whole bunch of books before this part of the journey. So writing all these books, writing for Playboy and for the New York Post and all these different publications and all that. Then I had my first child, and suddenly all my systems had to change. Right. So for you guys or the listeners who have kids, know that it's just like suddenly everything goes out the window. It's like, well, I'm going to get 10 hours sleep tonight. Well, no, you're not. So it's like you're going to have to work around this for the next 10 years until your kids sleep at night. So how are you going to get through that? And how can you parts of your life? And so that's really what all my talks are about. So I've done 3 TED Talks, one on the main stage or the second stage of the main TED, which is up in Vancouver. And I've done 2 TEDx's. So the first one that I did was actually about the positive power of observation. So how things change based on how people are observed. And it's like a 4-minute talk. You can check it out on my website at damonbrown.net. I did a second talk about big ideas on a little piece of paper. And I'm a big advocate of index cards. But some people might use like a scrap piece of paper or whatever. And I talk about how big ideas that come from us not making like a PowerPoint presentation. It doesn't have to be complex. Brilliant ideas come if we just calm down, relax, and actually use simple traditional methods to write down our ideas and get things off the ground. And then the last one, which I did, which is absolutely my favorite, is on the power of good enough. And so how we often strive for perfection, but then perfection also often stops us from being great because we're not making that art. I mean, as you mentioned before, we started rolling like you are on, in the 30s. It starts with what episode this podcast is. So if you're waiting till everything was perfect to do your podcast, we wouldn't be talking like that. So that's one of the things. It's like helping people just get started, get yourself off the ground, and trying to, as a coach, it's all the same, trying to remove those blocks. Like I have complete confidence that every single person has what they need to move forward and probably knows what their next move is. My goal as a coach, as a speaker, as an author, is to help them remove the blocks and help them see it. Like, I believe that everyone has potential to do whatever they're planning on doing. It's more like what's blocking you from doing. So my whole philosophy is to say, how can I help you empower yourself and remove those blocks from stopping you to getting to the next level of your business.
Understood. James, you have. I think you wanted to come and chime in.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions for Damon.
Sure.
One of the first questions, problems that a new entrepreneur or somebody considering going into business for themselves is financing. Maybe you have some comments or advice for people wanting to start up, what they need for how to get seed money and then their initial funding.
That's a really good question. I'll give you a really quick story. Probably one of my favorite things that happened this year. I was interacting with someone, and I was talking with him, and they had a great idea, a really good idea. And we're not talking in person, but when I hear a good idea, like my face changes, and the poker face goes away, and I start lighting up because, I help people get their ideas out. So when I hear a good idea and I can tell they're passionate about it, then I get excited, like it's my idea, And so someone's talking to me about their idea, and they said the only problem, I've had this idea for a while, but the only problem is I don't have money. I was like, okay. So how long you had the idea? And they were like, yeah, I had the idea for a little while. And I was like, okay, someone else is going to do this idea. Like, this idea is meant to happen. And I was like, okay, so they were like, so how do I get money? And I was like, well, what are you trying to do? And they were like, well, I'm trying to start a website. I was like, okay. And I was like, and what else do you need? And they're like, well, I also need like a web manager to organize it and do the database. I was like, okay. I was like, so you don't need money then. You need a website and someone to manage it. And they were really confused. And so we had to talk for like 15 minutes. And my whole point is that often we look at money as the thing that we need. But in reality, we need money to get some other type of resource. And as soon as you shift the mindset to that, then it becomes all these other options. For some of the startups, both the startups that I did were bootstraps. So there was no outside investment.
Yeah.
And so I ended up discussing barter. It ended up being leveraging the networks that we currently had. Because I had two co-founders. So leveraging that network. To figure out things rather than using money. And so that's not as luxurious as saying, hey, I got a seed round, or hey, I got, I'm doing my Series A worth, a few million or whatever. It's not as sexy by far, but it does allow you to maximize the resources you currently have, and you can get really creative with it. As far as getting seed money, it's traditionally the friends and family round, and really getting your idea tight. For Cutler, again, we were the number one app for quite a while, and so we were talking to a lot of VCs, and the conversations were difficult. Not because the VCs weren't interested; they were actually calling us, which is great, but because they didn't quite understand what we were trying to do. And the thing is that the more innovative isn't the right word, but the more ahead of your particular idea concept is, the longer it's going to take VCs to actually understand. But whether you decide to bootstrap, just do seed, which is often like angel investing, so it's no kind of commitment, or if you end up, going bootstrapping as we did, it ended up being a great exercise. Automatically think, how would I pitch this to a particular investor? Because what happens is that it takes the rose-colored glasses off. And we bootstrapped the whole way. When we ended up selling the company, we already broke down the percentages, so we all got a check, which is a beautiful thing. So it wasn't even complicated as far as going through VCs and having a board and all that stuff. It was just we decided to sell. But we knew what our value was because we were already talking to VCs. We knew what our value was because we already prepared pitch decks just in case the conversations with VCs went a particular way, even though we weren't interested in funding. And so it's kind of like the Bite-Sized Entrepreneurs book, the Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, as well as my new one, Bring Your Words. They're both self-published. And so I've been working in a traditional publishing industry for several years. I've had traditional books published. But the beautiful thing is that even though I self-publish these books, I still know what goes into a book proposal. And so I know how to market the book. I know who the audience is. I know how much it's going to cost to get it out. I know which cities I'm going to tour when the book comes out. All those things came from me talking with and working within traditional publishing. So to kind of put a cap on your question, I think the number one thing is to figure out if you actually have a money problem or if you have a resource problem. And often, 99% of the time, we have a resource problem. Like if you need to pay someone a salary, that might be a money problem. But other than that, or if you need insurance for your thing, or both of the things that I've done have been software or cloud-based. And I started out as an entrepreneur just when that was happening. So we ended up being really efficient. Like we didn't have physical hardware. If you have physical hardware, then you might need to get some capital because you physically need to get this made. That's a different discussion. So I respect that. If you're talking software, though, you got some amazing tools now. And my big entrepreneurship play, as far as when I sold my company, was almost 5 years ago now. So imagine now the amount of stuff, it's crazy. And if I was able to do that in 2014, 2015, you do amazing stuff now going into 2020. Yeah. So that's one. And then the second thing is to go through the process of how you would actually pitch yourself, whether or not you decide to get venture funding, because that's going to help you either way. Just like as an author, when I got into self-publishing, it made it a lot easier because I knew the conversations that the traditional publishers, the Penguins, the Crowns, the NAP, like the major publishers, the conversations I would have with them, I was having with myself. And so before the book even came out, I already had a runway. You want to have that runway for your startup, whether you get VC funding or not.
Yeah. One thing that you often hear about startup on business is don't use your credit cards. You have any comments on that?
I've heard both directions. If you talk about if you know the beginning of Airbnb, if you know Elon Musk, and like darn near every startup he's done, they've leaned heavily on that, like ridiculously so. So the challenge though is that what if they didn't make it? There's a term that's popular in Silicon Valley. You guys might have heard of it. It's called survivor's bias. So it basically means that people do something crazy and then they're managed to get out of it, or they got lucky. And so we point at them, and Inc. magazine, we put them on the cover, so we're part of the problem. But, we'll see them on the cover and be like, oh, well, Elon Musk did that, so he survived. But for every Elon Musk, there's literally tens of thousands of people. I know some of them who didn't make it. And they end up leveraging all this stuff and losing stuff. Again, I'm not about losing stuff and losing stuff to the point where their main life is destroyed. And so you kind of know my answer to that, where it's like, and I've had my ups and downs. So, if you read my latest book, I've talked about the financial stuff. So I get it. At the same time, though, you want to be wise about it and understand that there's no guarantee that you're going to succeed. And sometimes when you end up cutting your losses, you end up finding something smarter. I just wrote about it today in my Inc. column. Again, you go to inkdamonbrown.com. And I believe the column was why it's important to understand and recognize opportunities and not to be pessimistic. And what I mean by that is with Stuart Butterfield, he's an entrepreneur, and he started Flickr and he started Slack. And obviously he's known more for Slack now. They just went public a few months ago. Both of those came from failures where he had two other startups and he was losing money. They weren't working out well. He ended up letting go most of his staff both times and ended up pivoting into a different direction. The first time was to Flickr. Then he took a risk again, started another company. That one ended up failing, and he pivoted over to Slack. And obviously Slack is worth several $billions now. But my whole point is that if he just kept on moving in that same direction and leveraging everything to make this one idea work, then we wouldn't be talking about him now. And Slack and earlier Flickr wouldn't have happened. So sometimes, and I write about this, The Ultimate Bite-sized Entrepreneur, sometimes those things are a signal to give up. And maybe a better or smarter idea will come up to the surface. I wasn't planning on being an entrepreneur in the fashion that I planned on being. And like I said, I had a business team that I was working with, and they completely flaked on me. And I ended up learning all these different tools and all these different methods, and ended up becoming a really good solo entrepreneur, and then later on a good co-founder. But that wasn't my plan. But if I stuck to that particular plan and said it had to be this way, then the books and the speaking and all that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't be able to help people now. And so sometimes letting go is that, and sometimes the financial aspect is a sign that you need to let go.
Well, another quick question. Any comments about business plans?
Business plans in general, I think that the further we get into the future, the less relevant they're going to be. And what I mean by that is my family, and I talk about this in Bring Your Worth, I have entrepreneurs in my family. But it wasn't until recently where I realized they're entrepreneurs, because no one used the word entrepreneurship in my family. They just did stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. My grandfather owns a few bars on this side of the city. That's cool. But no one said entrepreneurship. And so the reason I bring that up is that for the earlier generations, they actually did have traditional business plans. But, for other people, though, for that period of time, and I don't mean that generation, I mean just literally like 20, 30 years ago, so more of a time period. If you start a business now, though, there's so much non-traditional funding. Number one, there's bootstrapping, which we talked about. Number two, there's venture capital, which they ask for business plans, but they don't really. They more ask for pitch decks, which is kind of like business plan light. And, you're going to go ahead, you're going to say at the 5-year mark, it's going to look like a hockey stick. That's pretty much like, there's going to be a page in there that has the hockey stick reference.
Right.
That's going to be like page 12, and then it's going to be contact information for the rest of the team. It's like, that's kind of the way pitch decks work. It's not how, when my stepfather or other folks were doing business plans and they're trying to get a loan from the bank 20, 30 years ago, that's not how it works. And so number two, you have the VCs. Number three, you have the crowdfunding, which is a whole different thing. So there's so many different ways that you can do non-traditional stuff. And so over the business plan, if you do a business plan, personally, if I was starting another business right now, I'd have a business plan that would be 2-3 pages. Maybe I try to get it to 1 page. And instead, it might be a pitch deck, or it might be if it was a public-facing thing, it might be a 2-minute video as far as the intention of the business. But there's so many non-traditional ways to do a business plan. And the last thought on that is that things change so much. Like, it's kind of random, but with like digital currency and Bitcoin and things of that nature, with the crypto, that wasn't a big thing 3-4 years ago. Now it is. 10 years ago, Facebook was barely getting started. Twitter just turned 10. So it's like, so the medium and the financing, all those things change so quickly that if you come up with a business plan, for the next 5 years, it's going to be obsolete. And I think that's optimistic. And so I think it's better to set goals, better to figure out what your intention and feel is, and to focus more on the why rather than on the how.
Powerful. Well, so, Damon, my question to you is, what is the, okay, well, I have to, it's actually like a two-part question.
Sure.
And the first is, okay, first of all, do you believe in the whole analogy of I'm a product of my environment? What do you think of stuff like that?
I agree with that, but I think you decide what kind of product you're going to be.
Okay.
So I'll give you like a simple example. I have family from some of the rougher parts of the East Coast. I'm originally from South Jersey. And I have family in Camden, which, if you know South Jersey, Camden's pretty rough. And most of them are doing amazing things. And I know other folks that aren't. They're having a really tough time. And it's not a judgment on other people. It's more like whatever happens to you, you choose how it forms you. With my aforementioned experience when I first became an entrepreneur, again, like, I became an entrepreneur. It was trial by fire. Like, had my 4-month-old son. My wife just went back to work, so it's me 12, 13 hours a day taking care of this little guy, and I have no idea what I'm doing. At the same time of me starting a startup, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And that could have been an extremely bitter experience. Luckily, even like sorting through stuff and trusting, to get spiritual for a second, is trusting the universe and realizing that things happen for a particular moment, not for a reason, but for a particular moment. And it's like, okay, well, at this moment, this is what my life is. And luckily, all those lessons, all those gems, that product could have been me being angry at the people that let me down. When there's supporting me, it could have been me getting bitter and then giving up on work as far as becoming an entrepreneur. But the product instead ended up being an entrepreneur twice over, me having a lot of success with my second startup, me doing TED Talks, and me even talking to you right now. Like, but those are all based on those gems, as we talk about, diamonds are created under pressure. They're just gold. And so that's my take on product and environment. Where I absolutely agree with your product and environment, but what product you're being, like, that's totally up to you. Like, we have to own it. And I have people that I'm close to have had really rough lives, and they chose to take a particular path. It comes down to this. I'm sure I wrote this somewhere in the Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur book, but you can't choose what happens to you, but you choose what happens to you. And if you choose not to trust people because someone betrayed you, then that's something you're going to carry away. If you choose to say, wow, someone betrayed me, number one, I need to think about who I trust. And number two, wow, I learned how strong I was. And the things that I said this in a recent Inc. column, the things that I attributed to someone else, I actually found out I had that strength when they left. That's a gem right there. Like, it gives me chills just to think about it. Like, that happened like 5 years ago. It still gives me chills. But that was my big lesson. And so I'm absolutely a prophet. But I choose what I'm going to be, and I think we all have that power. We just don't always realize it's power. It's a lot easier to just point at an environment and say that's why I'm bitter. But I don't think that's true at all.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then that was pretty direct explanation, and I completely understand exactly how you came to that conclusion. Then the other half of the question is, what we spoke about earlier about the meaning of, you said success really depends on the individual. What does it mean to you, success?
Wow. That's a really personal question, and I mean that in the best way possible, because I think it's different for every single individual. As you can tell, I'm really into individuality, and it's like I believe that everyone has their particular path. So I feel like my job is just to help them on it. For me, success is fulfilling my highest potential while I'm around. That's it. And if that means changing the direction of the world, so be it. If it ends up being something a lot less grandiose, then so be it. But maximizing whatever I've got. So that means all the resources. So all the time, all the money, all the love, all the focus, all the attention, like maximizing all of it as realistically as possible. That, to me, that's success. And if I can do that every day, then I'm doing fine. And some days I fall short, and then I trust I'm going to make up for it the next day. But for me, success is as simple as that. One quick sidebar is that a lot of people that I talk with, that I do coaching with, they're trying to do a pivot. They're trying to go in a different direction. I have a friend named Jenny Blake who has a book called Pivot, and she talks about that. And her and I became friends because we realized we were talking about the same thing. But taking a pivot in your career, and I can coach people on that because I've done the same thing. And so what I realized is that I have 2 degrees in journalism, but at a certain point, I started writing books. I didn't go to school for that. No one teaches you that. And then I became an entrepreneur, and definitely no one taught me that. Maybe there's schools now. There wasn't schools 5 years ago for entrepreneurship, right? It's trial by fire. In all those cases, I focused less on my title and more on what impact I was trying to make. And so we can call it branding, which is what a marketing person would call it. But whether you're hearing me on a podcast, or you're buying one of my books, or you come to YouTube, I have speaking engagements. They're on my website at damonbrown.net. I'm going to be in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in a couple weeks for a writers' conference. I'm actually going to be doing some stuff in the Midwest shortly. That'll be on my website. That'll be in the fall, in October. Whether you come to one of my speaking engagements, whether you come have a drink with me, or whatever, you're getting the same discussion. And what I realized is that it doesn't matter what the impact is. It's about what the intention is. And so that's what I'm trying to get at, is that success to me is having a big house, having a nice car. It isn't like some concrete goal where it's like, okay, I'm going to grab this thing. It's more about what's my intention and how close can I stay to it every day. And if I do that, then it doesn't matter what happens to the economy. It doesn't matter if people stop. It doesn't matter if people stop coming to speaking engagements. It doesn't matter if people stop coming to podcasts or listening. I'm still going to be doing the same thing, because it's not about the medium, but about what I'm trying to convey in it. And that in itself becomes the focus. And I think that's why I've been able to be adaptable over the 20 or so years since I came out of grad school, is that it doesn't have to be Damon's a journalist. Like, no, Damon has this potential. And it ends up being, how can I connect with people the most versus me connecting with them in a certain way. And I think once you start putting labels on that kind of success, then that's when you start to feel boxed in when the environment changes. And I'd rather be adaptable. And I think that's kind of the best way to go.
All right. This segment, we kind of, we kind of speak on, like, okay, next steps. So, try to see if you can, like, fill in the blanks of what I state, and maybe you can end it, right? I don't know if I'm even stating it correctly, but
no, it makes sense. Along. Yeah, I could follow.
All right. Today I fail, but tomorrow
I fail again.
So again, explain that.
yeah. Let me break it down. I think that's part of the process, and the ability to say, "Yeah, I'm going to fall again." As soon as you accept that, at least for me, as soon as you accept that, then everything's fine. If you assume that things are going to be perfect next time, here's what happens. If you assume things are going to be perfect, even if things are perfect, you're going to take it for granted because that's what you assume. But if things go sideways and you thought things are going to be perfect, you're going to be really sad or whatever, ungrateful. Instead, if you say, you know what, it could go either direction or any direction, but I'm going to be grateful for however it works out. Then if things go sideways, then you'll be like, all right, well, what can I gain from this? Like I talked about before. If things go great, you'll be really grateful that things go great. And so I assume that things aren't going to always work out. And if I fail today, then I'll probably fail tomorrow. But that will make the win sweeter, whenever it does go the way that I like it.
That's powerful. I definitely would commend you on that. I just want to ask you, what would you want to tell our audience exactly about what, the steps that they need to go to, when you have the TED Talks and you're doing your consulting and you're speaking to big arenas, the audiences that we have are, they range from baby boomers all the way to Generation Zers. But primarily, what would you tell the millennials and the Generation Zers? Because I consider them, just like a lot of people consider them the generation now. What would you tell them that they would need to do to really be successful in their lives, in their work, business, and their relationships? What steps should they be taking to better themselves?
No, that makes perfect sense. That's a great question, and that was really the emphasis of bring your worth, level up your creative power, value, and service to the world. So, my new book that just came out in February. And it's broken down into three really basic tenets. Number one thing is everything is a partnership. So whether you're working for a big corporation that's worth $1 billion and you feel like you're a cog in the wheel, or you're working with somebody and you're just doing a little startup and you're bootstrapping the whole thing, or you're paying someone else, to do something for you. Everything is a partnership. Once you decide that, then suddenly you give more respect to the people that are working for you and with you, and then you end up commanding more respect from the places that you work at. Again, that proverbial $1 billion corporation. Because if you were really just a cog in the wheel, then they wouldn't have hired you in the first place. So you bring some type of unique gift to every single business interaction. Whether it's you stopping at the gas station, you getting gas from Chevron, or you going to work, for six figures at, Morgan Stanley, and they're worth several billion or $1 trillion. Like that, those things wouldn't have been happening if you weren't bringing value to the situation. So number one, that everything is a partnership. Number two is don't wait for permission. And so a lot of the people that I work with, and particularly with my speaking engagements, if you go and, again, you go to damonbrown.net and you'll see my speaking engagements, you'll see a pattern there, and I'm happy to reveal it, where I'm all about helping people not wait for permission. We're waiting for the sun to shine a certain way. We're waiting for a certain amount of money. We're waiting for the approval of a parent or a loved one to go forward. We're waiting for the economy to get better. We're waiting for this product to see how this product goes, and then maybe we'll come out with our new product. We're waiting for that original idea, even though we have another idea that might. Anyway, we're waiting and waiting and waiting. We're really waiting for permission. We're waiting for someone to give us a cosign. And 95% of the career I have now, and now I've been in the business long enough to know that if I waited for someone else's permission, I wouldn't have had success. Straight up. I can give like 10 examples off the top, which I will not do. But there's so many examples where I'm like, wow, if I waited till so-and-so said, yes, Damon, do that book. If I waited till so-and-so said, yes, that's a great startup idea, you should go do it. If I waited for so-and-so to cut me a check, half the stuff we talked about as far as my timeline and stuff that I've done wouldn't have happened. So number two, don't wait for permission. There's no reason, the technology and the connections we have right now, there's no reason, very little to no reason for you not to start on your big thing today. Like none. Particularly if you're young. Like forget about it. Right? So number two, don't wait for permission. And number three, understand that you have a legacy. And so that goes forward and back. It's really important. And so for me, as I get older, I'm realizing, I talk about this in Bring the Word, that I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and I'm thinking, I'm going to do future stuff, and no one can understand my pain. And I'm realizing, I thought about it, I'm like, wait, I got like 2-3 generations of entrepreneurs behind me on both sides. And I was like, I was watching, use that term. They were giving me game when I was a kid. I just didn't realize it. Right? And so I have a legacy behind me, but then I have my kids. And I remember I had to go to a business meeting about a year ago, and I was throwing on, my blazer, because I have a traditional blazer and usually a t-shirt and some jeans. And my eldest son came up to me. He's like, "Dad, are you going to do a TED Talk?" And I was like, "What?" And I was just going to have coffee with somebody, and it blew my mind. Like, for my kids, that's normal. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, not even trying to gas me up or say I'm great. I'm saying no. Like that is a normal thing in our household. But we're all creating norms. Whether it's the older generations or with the young generation, we're all creating norms. Those norms could be within our circle. My circle of friends who I've been cool with for a long time, their levels have changed, and that influences me. But then as I level up, that influences them. And so we all have a legacy. So again, when I pass away one day, and hopefully my kids are still around, and they get the opportunity to TED Talk, it's not going to be weird to see, a young black guy on the TED stage. That's not a barrier for them. Like, they're like, "Oh yeah, Dad did it all the time. He did 3 TED Talks since I was alive." That's nothing. And so they're able to level up. So that would be the 3 things. It's number 1, everything. Understand your own value and the value that you bring. Number 2, don't wait for permission. So there's no reason to be waiting around for someone to co-sign you. Just do your thing. Like, you really don't need a co-sign. And lastly, you have a legacy, and that legacy is behind you, with your family, and like you said, the creation of your environment, and then that's ahead of you. So the things that you're creating, the things you put out into the world, this podcast, the speaking engagements, whatever, that's leading a trail and creating things for the next generation, no matter how small it might feel. And so that would be my big message. And I did a whole entire book. That's like a really passionate topic of mine. But particularly when you're younger, sometimes it's easy to undervalue yourself because you might not have a lot of money in your pocket. There might not be a whole lot of people that are looking up to you yet. But it's so important to start creating that legacy right away because you have something unique to say. So say it. Create whatever you think needs to be in this world, and then the rest of it will follow.
Nice. And that's a home run out of the park. We like can I get a one-time soul clap for Mr. Damon Brown? DamonBrown.net is where you can find him. You can also find his columns on Inc.com, Inc. magazine, and just a city near you. Again, he has the website DamonBrown.net. And thank you, Mr. Damon Brown, for coming on and really kind of giving insight to our listenership. It's and the young millennials and Generation Z, and also the baby boomers and Generation Xers. Because I think what one thing that you say with prevalence is that everybody's kind of trying to get to the next level. It doesn't even matter if it's older or younger. The generation is trying to get to the next level and bettering themselves. So I really do appreciate, and this is the EFR podcast. Featuring Damon Brown. I am Sammy BE, businessman Bassy, along with James Lyman, and on the boards, Jon Don Sterling, tongue twister. EFR Podcast, episode 34. We're out of here. Thank you.
Oh, and one last thing too. If you guys are interested in getting some more gems from me, you can come to joindamon.me, and I shoot out a thing to my community every other Wednesday, and it's just a lot of discussion that we had today. And so I'd love for you to join me over there too. And thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Can you repeat that one more time? Dane,
oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's joindamon.me.
Joindamon.me. Get a lot of insight and tools from Mr. Damon Brown, and he brings a lot of perspective, and we'd like to, let's get another one time slow clap in, John, for Mr. Brown, and we thank you for coming in, and we will definitely be following your success and your progress, and soon enough have you back on. All right, this is the EFR Podcast. Stay blessed and God bless.